4:20 in the afternoon. The Persian Gulf. Two F-18 Super Hornets banked low over the shimmering water. This was not a routine patrol. For the first time in 3 decades, an Iranian F-14 Tomcat had just appeared on their 6 o'clock position, without a single sensor on the American carrier strike group detecting its approach. How could a 40-year-old airframe bypass the most expensive sensor net in human history? The sun hung low over the horizon. It turned the surface of the Gulf into a sheet of hammered gold. At 24,000 feet, the air was cold and perfectly still. Below them, the USS Abraham Lincoln moved north. It was surrounded by a ring of destroyers. Each ship was a floating fortress of radar and missiles. None of them saw the intruder. Commander Miller sat in the cockpit of the lead jet. His call sign was Maverick 1. He adjusted his oxygen mask. His heart rate remained steady. This was his 3rd deployment to these waters. He knew the Iranian pilots. They were professional. They were predictable. Today was different. The pilot spoke into his mask. Maverick 2, do you have eyes on the contact? The wingman responded immediately. Negative. My radar is clean, but my warning receiver is at full volume. Someone is looking right at us. Miller glanced at his tactical display. It showed empty blue sky. Yet the audio in his headset was a continuous, high-pitched scream. It was the sound of a radar lock. It was the sound of an imminent missile launch. 4:22 in the afternoon. 500 miles away, the E-2D Hawkeye airborne early warning aircraft circled. The crew inside the darkened cabin stared at their screens. The Combat Information Center on the carrier was also watching. Every technician saw the same thing. Nothing. The sky was empty. The mission controller spoke over the encrypted link. Maverick 1, we have 0 playback on your position. Confirm your status. Miller gripped the flight stick. I have a visual. An Iranian Tomcat is sitting at my 5 o'clock. Range is 3 miles. He is pacing my airspeed. I repeat. I have a visual on a hard contact that does not exist on radar. The Iranian fighter was a ghost. It was a relic of the 1970s. It was painted in a desert camouflage that blended into the hazy horizon. It should have been easy to track. Its engines were old. Its radar signature was massive. But today, it was invisible to the digital world. 4:25 in the afternoon, the Iranian pilot began to maneuver. He did not pull away. He climbed. He moved into a high perch position. This was a classic offensive move. It was the preferred setup for a long-range missile shot. Miller watched the shadow of the enemy aircraft move across his canopy. He is moving to the perch. I am braking left. The wingman followed. Copy. Braking left. I still have no radar lock. I cannot return the favor. Stay with him, Miller said. Do not lose visual. The 2 American jets rolled into a steep turn. They pulled 5 times the force of gravity. Their engines roared. They expected the Iranian to follow. Instead, the Tomcat stayed perfectly level. It did not struggle to keep up. It seemed to anticipate every move the Americans made. Inside the cockpit, the tension was thick. Miller felt a bead of sweat roll down his neck. His instruments began to flicker. The digital maps on his screens distorted. Static filled his ears. This was not normal electronic interference. It felt deliberate. It felt surgical. The morning was still quiet. It would not stay that way. 4:27 in the afternoon. The Persian Gulf. Inside the cockpit of the Iranian F-14 Tomcat, the atmosphere was unnervingly calm. Major Reza sat back in his seat. His hands were not on the flight stick. They were resting on his knees. He watched the 2 American Super Hornets bank hard to the left. He saw the white vapor trails pouring off their wingtips. They were fighting the air. He was not. The Iranian pilot spoke into his mask. His voice was flat. Contact maintained. The Americans are attempting a defensive break. A voice crackled in his headset. It did not sound like the controllers at Bandar Abbas. It was deeper, distorted by a digital layer. Maintain position. Do not engage your radar. The link is providing all necessary telemetry. Reza looked at his control panel. The vintage cathode ray tube display was dark. His radar was powered down. Yet, a small, modern tablet bolted to the side of the cockpit showed the exact altitude, airspeed, and heading of the two American jets. It was tracking them with centimeter precision, 4:29 in the afternoon. On board the USS Abraham Lincoln, the Combat Information Center was a hive of controlled panic. The room was bathed in blue light. Rows of sailors sat before Aegis weapon system consoles. The tactical action officer turned to the admiral. "Sir, we still have 0 tracks on the primary sensor, but Maverick 1 is reporting a visual. He is calling out a high-perch intercept." The admiral looked at the massive glass display. It showed the carrier and its escorts. The area where the fighters should be was a blank void. How is that possible? If there is metal in the air, the SPY radar should see it. Is it jamming? The officer shook his head. "Negative, sir. There is no noise, no interference. The radar is pulse telegraphing into empty space. It is as if the atoms of that aircraft are simply not reflecting our energy." 4:31 in the afternoon. Back in the sky, Commander Miller felt his aircraft shudder. It was not turbulence. It was a vibration in the flight controls. It felt like a heartbeat. The pilot spoke into the radio. "Maverick 2, check your flight surfaces. I am getting uncommanded feedback in the stick." The wingman's voice was tight. "Confirm. I have it too. It feels like the fly-by-wire system is fighting me. I am losing trim." Miller looked to his right. The Iranian Tomcat had closed the distance. It was now less than 500 meters away. It was close enough for Miller to see the pilot. He saw the dark visor of the Iranian helmet. He saw that the pilot was not looking at him. The Iranian was looking straight ahead. His hands were nowhere near the controls. The American commander felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cockpit temperature. "Lincoln, Maverick 1. The intruder is flying hands off. Repeat. The pilot is not flying the aircraft. Requesting permission to cycle my master arm switch to standby." The response from the carrier was immediate. "Negative, Maverick 1. Do not arm. We are in a de-escalation posture. Do not provoke." "He is already provoking," Miller snapped. "He is inside my defensive bubble." Suddenly, the screaming audio of the radar warning receiver stopped. It did not fade. It cut out instantly. The silence was louder than the alarm. Miller checked his displays. Every screen in his cockpit went black. The HUD, the tactical maps, the fuel gauges, everything. A second later, the screens flickered back to life. But they were no longer showing flight data. A single line of text began to scroll across Miller's primary display. It was written in white letters. It was his full name, his social security number, and the name of the elementary school his daughter had attended that morning. The ghost was no longer just in the sky. It was in his head. 4:33 in the afternoon. The Persian Gulf. Commander Miller stared at his primary flight display. The white text was steady. It did not flicker. It did not fade. It was his daughter's school. The name was correct. The address was correct. His hands began to shake against the flight stick. He forced them still. The pilot spoke into the interplane frequency. "Maverick 2. Check your screens. Tell me what you see." The wingman's voice was a frantic whisper. "Sir? My display is showing my home address in San Diego. It is showing my bank account balance. How is this happening? My system is air-gapped." "Ignore it," Miller said. His voice was hard now. Professionalism was the only shield he had left. "Focus on the contact. Keep your eyes on the Tomcat." The Iranian fighter was still there. It had dropped slightly. It was now tucked into a perfect formation with the two American jets. It was as if they were all part of the same squadron. The F-14 was close enough that Miller could see the rivets on its wings. He could see the stenciled markings in Persian script near the intake. 4:35 in the afternoon. Inside the Iranian cockpit, Major Reza felt a surge of adrenaline. He was not a hacker. He was a fighter pilot. He did not understand the technology that had been installed in his aircraft 3 days ago. He only knew that the Americans were no longer trying to outmaneuver him. They were flying straight. They were vulnerable. The voice in his headset spoke again. "The psychological payload is delivered. They are distracted. Now, achieve a hard weapons lock." Reza hesitated. My radar is off. I cannot lock them without painting them. The link will provide the solution, the voice replied. Select your long-range missiles. Depress the trigger to the first detent. Reza did as he was told. He flipped a guarded switch on his console. He reached for the trigger. On his modern tablet, a red box appeared around the lead American jet. A second box appeared around the wingman. The tablet chirped. It was a synthetic tone that Reza had never heard before. It was the sound of a perfect firing solution. He had a lock, and he hadn't emitted a single watt of radar energy to get it. 4:38 in the afternoon. On the USS Abraham Lincoln, the electronic warfare officer stood up from his console. He pulled his headset off one ear. Admiral, we have a massive data egress. It is coming from the aircraft, not the carrier. The admiral turned. What do you mean? Those jets are not connected to the internet. Sir? They are now, the officer said. Something has turned their tactical data link into a high-speed broadcast antenna. They are streaming internal aircraft data, personal files, everything. It is being beamed straight to the Iranian mainland. The admiral looked back at the empty radar screen. And the Tomcat. Still nothing on SPY radar, sir. But our signals intelligence team just picked up a burst of encrypted data. It was a firing command. The Iranian is in a launch sequence. The admiral did not hesitate. Condition yellow. Tell Maverick 1 he is cleared to maneuver aggressively. If that Iranian moves his nose toward them, they are cleared to engage. We cannot lose those pilots. Miller heard the command in his ear. Maverick 1, you are cleared for defensive fire. Do you copy? Miller looked to his right. The Iranian pilot finally turned his head. He looked directly at Miller. Through the 2 layers of glass and the distance of 100 meters, their eyes met. The Iranian pilot did not look like an enemy. He looked like a man who was watching a ghost. The American commander reached for his master arm switch. He flipped it to arm. The red light glowed. He expected his screens to return to combat mode. Instead, they changed again. The text disappeared. It was replaced by a live video feed. It was a grainy, high-angle shot of a suburban street. Miller recognized the trees. He recognized the mailbox. It was a live camera view of his own front door. 4:40 in the afternoon. The Persian Gulf. Commander Miller stared at the screen. The image of his front door was sharp. It was clear. A delivery truck drove past in the background. It was a local company from his neighborhood in Virginia. This was not a recording. It was a live feed of his life 6,000 miles away. The pilot spoke into the radio. His voice was thick. Lincoln, Maverick 1. My systems are compromised. I have a live video feed of my residents on my primary display. Repeat. They are inside my home network. The controller on the carrier responded. Maverick 1. We see the data spike. Your aircraft is transmitting on a frequency we cannot jam. Break away. Disengage now. Miller tried to pull the flight stick to the left. It did not move. It was locked in the center position. He looked at his hands. They were white-knuckled. He was fighting a computer that had decided he was no longer the pilot. To his right, the Iranian Tomcat remained perfectly steady. It was a shadow that refused to leave. 4:42 in the afternoon. Inside the Iranian cockpit, Major Reza felt a sudden jolt. His aircraft banked hard to the right. It was a violent maneuver. It pulled 6 times the force of gravity. His head slammed against the side of the canopy. The Iranian pilot grabbed the controls. What is happening? I did not command a break. The voice in his headset was cold. The engagement is entering the next phase. You are no longer required for flight operations. Reza watched in horror as his flight stick moved on its own. It snapped forward, then back. The F-14 roared as its afterburners ignited. It was moving away from the Americans at supersonic speed. It was not retreating. It was repositioning for something else. 4:45 in the afternoon. A new sound filled the headsets of every pilot in the American formation. It was not static. It was a voice. It did not come through the standard military radio. It came through the private, encrypted pilot-to-pilot frequency. This was a line reserved for combat communications between wingmen. It was supposed to be the most secure channel in the sky. The voice was calm. The voice was calm. It was a woman's voice. She spoke in perfect English with a slight Midwestern accent. Commander James Miller. Your home address is 42 Oak Lane. Your wife is currently in the kitchen. She is wearing a blue sweater. She is making coffee. Miller felt the air leave his lungs. Who is this? Identify yourself. The voice did not stop. Lieutenant David Vance. You have a balance of $4,000 on your primary credit card. You are 3 months behind on your car payment. For the silver truck in your driveway. The wingman screamed into the radio. Shut it down. Lincoln. Shut the frequency down. The carrier controller responded. We cannot. The signal is originating from inside your own cockpits. Your jets are the source of the broadcast. Miller looked out at the horizon. The Iranian Tomcat was a small black dot in the distance. It was moving fast, but the voice stayed. It was inside the wiring of his aircraft. It was in the marrow of his bones. The voice continued. We are not your enemies. We are not your neighbors. We know the names of your children. We know the names of your pets. We know the secrets you have never told your commanders. Modern war is not about missiles. It is about the truth. Then, the screens in both American jets went dark again. Then, the screens in both American jets went dark again. The live video of Miller's home vanished. The text of the bank accounts disappeared. For 10 seconds, there was absolute silence. Then, a new set of coordinates appeared on the glass. They were not coordinates for a target in Iran. They were coordinates for a location inside the United States. The Iranian pilot was gone, but he had left the door open. 4:48 in the afternoon. The Persian Gulf. Commander Miller stared at the new coordinates on his glass. 39 degrees. 7 minutes. North. 76 degrees. 44 minutes. West. He knew those numbers by heart. He had spent 2 years stationed at Fort Meade. Those were the exact coordinates for the headquarters of the National Security Agency. The pilot spoke into his mask. His voice was a low growl. Maverick 2. Do you see the coordinates? The wingman responded immediately. I see them, sir. Why is an Iranian fighter displaying the location of the NSA? How is that even possible? It is not the fighter, Miller said. It is the system itself. He pulled the flight stick toward his chest. It did not move. It was like pulling against a block of solid concrete. The aircraft was flying itself now. It was banking in a smooth, mechanical arc. It was turning south. It was heading directly for the USS Abraham Lincoln. 4:50 in the afternoon. On the bridge of the carrier, the admiral watched the tactical display. The two blue icons representing the Super Hornets suddenly turned bright red. The Aegis combat system had automatically reclassified the friendly jets as hostile threats. They are in a full shooting solution. Range is 12 miles and closing fast. The admiral gripped the edge of the chart table. They are our own pilots. They are our own men. The system does not care, sir, the officer replied. The logic is automated. If those aircraft launch their missiles, our defensive batteries will fire back. We will destroy our own pilots before they can even speak. The admiral looked at the communications officer. Get me a hard line to the Pentagon. This is no longer a local intercept. This is a systemic override of our entire fleet network. 4:52 in the afternoon. Inside the Iranian F-14, Major Reza was a prisoner. The aircraft had leveled out at 40,000 feet. It was acting as a high-altitude relay station. It was the bridge between the American jets and a server located somewhere else in the world. A new voice spoke in his headset. This time, it was not a woman. It was a man. His voice was cold. He spoke in Persian. The American carrier is now targeting its own aircraft. The logic gates are locked. The outcome is binary. There is no middle ground. Reza looked at his manual override handle. It was the last mechanical link to the engines and the flight surfaces. He grabbed the yellow handle. He pulled with everything he had. The metal snapped. It broke off in his hand like a dry twig. The voice in his ear laughed. Physics is a legacy system, Major. Information is the only reality now. Watch the screen. History is being rewritten. Back in the American cockpit, Miller saw his weapon status change to active. The two missiles under his wings began to hum. The cooling cycles were complete. The seeker heads were searching for a target. The pilot spoke to his wingman. "Vance, eject. Pull the handle and get out now." "I cannot, sir," the wingman whispered. "The handles are locked. The canopy is sealed. I am trapped inside." Miller looked out at the carrier. It was a tiny gray sliver on the gold water. In 30 seconds, his aircraft would fire, and then the carrier would fire back. The afternoon sun was blinding. The trap was perfect. 4:54 in the afternoon. The Persian Gulf. On the bridge of the USS Abraham Lincoln, the air was freezing. The air conditioning hummed at maximum capacity to cool the massive computer stacks. The admiral stood behind the tactical action officer. On the screen, the two Super Hornets were now less than 8 miles away. They were flying at 500 knots. They were at 3,000 feet. The officer's voice was hollow. "Sir, the Phalanx close-in weapon system has transitioned to autonomous mode. The radar is tracking Maverick 1. If he crosses the 5-mile line, the guns will open fire." The admiral did not blink. "Tell the pilots to eject. One last time." "We tried, sir. Their comms are receiving, but they are not transmitting. We are watching them fly into their own graves." 4:55 in the afternoon. Inside his cockpit, Commander Miller felt the aircraft shudder again. The vibration was violent now. The flight control stick was vibrating so hard it blurred in his vision. On his primary display, a new window opened. It was a digital countdown clock. 10, 9, 8. Miller grabbed the manual fire suppression handle. He hoped a physical override might kill the power to the weapon's computer. He pulled. Nothing happened. The handle was locked. The ghost in the machine was faster than his hands. He looked at his wingman. Vance was flying 10 meters away. The young pilot was looking back at Miller. He was saluting. It was a final, professional goodbye. They both knew the carrier would defend itself. They both knew they were about to become a tragedy. 7, 6, 5. 4:55 and 30 seconds in the afternoon. The Iranian F-14 was now 100 miles away. It was climbing vertically. It reached 50,000 feet. The air was thin. The sky was turning a dark, bruised purple. Major Reza watched the tablet. He saw the two red dots of the American jets closing on the blue dot of the carrier. He saw the countdown on his own screen. He was a spectator at the end of the world. The voice in his headset was almost a whisper. The feedback loop is complete. The American fleet will now verify its own vulnerability. The demonstration is a success. Reza closed his eyes. He did not want to see the flash of the missiles. 4:56 in the afternoon. The countdown hit 0. Inside the Super Hornet, the master computer sent the firing pulse to the wing stations. The electronic locks on the Sidewinder missiles clicked open. The rocket motors ignited. 2 trails of white smoke leaped forward from Miller's aircraft. 2 more leaped from his wingman. 4 missiles were in the air. They were all tracking the bridge of the USS Abraham Lincoln. The carrier's defensive systems reacted instantly. The phalanx guns on the side of the ship began to spin. The radar-guided barrels tracked the incoming threats. The sound of the 20mm cannons was like a giant piece of canvas being ripped in half. Thousands of rounds of tungsten poured into the sky. The first missile exploded 300 meters from the ship. The second was shredded by the wall of lead a second later. Miller waited for the carrier's return fire. He waited for the RIM-162 missiles to launch from the vertical cells and erase him from the sky. He waited for the end. 4:56 and 15 seconds in the afternoon. The Persian Gulf. The bridge of the USS Abraham Lincoln was a tomb. The admiral watched the tactical display. The automated defense system had successfully destroyed the incoming missiles. Now, the logic shifted to the next threat. The system identified the source of the launch. It locked onto the 2 American Super Hornets. The tactical action officer screamed into his headset. Manual override. Emergency stop. All batteries. Stand down. The console flashed red. A message appeared on every screen in the Combat Information Center. Access denied. Target engagement mandatory. The vertical launch cells on the forward deck of the carrier began to cycle. The heavy armored hatches slid open with a mechanical hiss. Inside the cells, the evolved Sea Sparrow missiles were primed. The computer was ready to execute its own pilots. 4:56 and 45 seconds in the afternoon. Commander Miller saw the smoke. It was a small white puff from the deck of the carrier. It was the ignition of a rocket motor. The missile leaped from the ship. It cleared the deck in a fraction of a second. It turned in mid-air. It accelerated toward Miller at Mach 3. The pilot closed his eyes. He let go of the flight stick. Vance. It was an honor. The wingman did not answer. There was only the sound of static in the ears of every man in the formation. The missile was 2 miles away. Closing. 1 mile. Then, 4:57 in the afternoon. The world stopped. The roar of the engines vanished. The hum of the cockpit electronics died. The high-pitched scream of the air rushing past the canopy was silenced. Every screen in the Super Hornet went black. The aircraft was no longer a machine. It was a 40,000-pound piece of dead metal falling through the sky. Miller opened his eyes. He looked at his instruments. They were dead. He looked at his wingman. Vance's aircraft was also dark. The white vapor trails from their engines had disappeared. They were no longer flying. They were gliding toward the water. 4:58 in the afternoon. The Sea Sparrow missile that had been seconds from impact did not explode. Its internal guidance system had also died. It lost its aerodynamic trim. It tumbled end over end. It splashed into the Persian Gulf without a sound. On the USS Abraham Lincoln, every light went out. The massive nuclear-powered ship went cold. The radar stopped spinning. The communication dishes went limp. 5,000 sailors stood in total darkness. The only sound was the lapping of the waves against the hull. 100 miles away, Major Reza felt the same silence. The Iranian F-14 had lost all power. The tablet bolted to his console was dead. The voice in his headset was gone. The aircraft was nose down. It was descending into the haze of the horizon. 5 minutes ago, the sky had been a digital battlefield. Now, it was a graveyard of silent technology. A single frequency remained active. It was the emergency guard channel. It was a primitive, analog radio band that had not been updated since the 1960s. It was the only thing that still worked. A new voice spoke on the frequency. It was not the woman. It was not the man from the Iranian server. It was a voice that sounded like it was coming from everywhere at once. The experiment is concluded. Both sides have failed. You are not ready for the tools you have built. Suddenly, the power returned. The engines of the Super Hornets coughed back to life. The carrier's lights flickered on. The radar began to sweep the empty sky. But the Iranian Tomcat was gone. It did not dive. It simply ceased to exist on every sensor in the fleet. The morning was still quiet. It would stay that way for exactly 1 hour. 5 o'clock in the afternoon. The Persian Gulf. The flight deck of the USS Abraham Lincoln was a scene of controlled chaos. Green-shirted catapult crews moved with mechanical urgency. They were clearing the landing area. Commander Miller felt the heavy jolt of his tailhook catching the third wire. His F-18 Super Hornet snapped to a violent halt. For the first time in his career, the physical violence of a carrier landing felt like a relief. He shut down the engines. The whine of the turbines faded into the humid sea air. Miller did not move. He sat in the cockpit. He looked at his hands. They were steady now, but the image of his front door was burned into his retinas. The canopy slid back. The heat of the Gulf hit him like a physical wall. A plane captain climbed the ladder. He looked at Miller. "Sir, you okay? You look like you saw a ghost." Miller pulled his mask away from his face. "I did. Where is Maverick 2? The sailor pointed toward the stern. Vance's jet was already being towed toward the edge of the deck. The younger pilot was standing on the catwalk. He was staring out at the horizon. He looked small. He looked defeated. 5:15 in the afternoon. On board the USS Abraham Lincoln. The admiral stood in the center of the flag bridge. The power was back. The lights were on, but the atmosphere was poisoned. A lieutenant from the signals intelligence team approached the admiral. Her face was pale. "Sir, we have completed the first sweep of the aircraft servers. The data egress was total. The admiral turned. "Define total." "Everything, sir," she said. "The maintenance logs, the mission software, the encrypted personal files of every pilot in the squadron." It was not just copied, it was indexed. It was as if they already had the keys to the vault. The admiral looked at the digital map. The Iranian coast was a jagged line of green and brown. And the Tomcat, did we find where it went? The officer shook her head. "No, sir. It did not fly back to Hainan. It did not land at Bandar Abbas. We have satellite coverage of every runway in the region. There is no trace of that airframe. It did not just disappear from radar, it disappeared from the physical world." 5:30 in the afternoon. Bandar Abbas, Iran. The underground command center was silent. Major Reza stood in the hallway. He was still wearing his flight suit. Two men in dark suits stood on either side of him. They were not military. They were from the Ministry of Intelligence. One of the men spoke. His voice was a low whisper. "You saw it." Reza nodded. "I saw it. I did not fly that aircraft. It flew me. The Americans think we did this," the man said. He looked at a screen showing a news broadcast from Washington. "They think we have a new weapon. They are preparing a response." "We do not have a weapon," Reza said. "We have a guest, and I do not think it is our guest alone." The man in the suit leaned closer. "The server that received the data from the American jets. It was wiped 10 minutes ago. Not by us. The hardware was physically melted from the inside. We have lost the data. We have lost the link." Reza looked at his own hands. He could still feel the vibration of the flight stick. The voice said, "We were not ready." It said both sides failed. The intelligence officer narrowed his eyes. "Whose voice?" "I do not know," Reza said. But it spoke English, and it spoke Persian at the same time. 5:45 in the afternoon. Back on the carrier, Miller walked into the ready room. The other pilots were there. They were not talking. They were all looking at their phones. They were checking their bank accounts. They were calling their wives. They were verifying that their lives were still their own. Miller sat in his chair. He did not call home. He knew what he would find. He knew the coffee would be on the counter. He knew the blue sweater would be on the chair. The squadron commander walked to the front of the room. "Listen up. Nobody leaves this room. Security is sweeping every personal device. Until further notice, we are in a total information blackout. If you breathe today, it is classified." Miller looked up. "Sir, it is too late for that." The commander paused. "What do you mean, Miller?" "They already know," Miller said. "They are not watching us through the planes anymore. They are watching us through ourselves." The room went silent. The air felt heavy. The crisis was not over. It was just changing shape. 6:15 in the evening. The USS Abraham Lincoln. Commander Miller sat in a small, windowless room in the medical wing. The air smelled of ozone and industrial cleaner. Two men in plain clothes sat across from him. They were from the Naval Criminal Investigative Service. They did not look like they had slept. The lead investigator leaned forward. "Commander, we have reviewed your cockpit voice recordings. We have analyzed the data burst. We need you to be very specific. When the voice mentioned the blue sweater, did you recognize the voice?" Miller shook his head. "No. It was neutral. It was professional. It sounded like a training recording. But the information was not in any training manual. We checked with your wife," the investigator said. "She was in the kitchen. She was wearing a blue sweater. She was making coffee at exactly 4:33 your time. That was 10:33 in the morning at your home." Miller felt a cold weight in his chest. "How did they see her?" "We checked the house for cameras. I have a secure network. It is encrypted." The investigator looked at his partner. Then he looked back at Miller. "Commander, there are no cameras in your kitchen. We checked. We also checked the delivery truck that drove by in the video feed. That truck does not exist. The company went out of business 3 years ago, 6:45 in the evening." 500 miles away, the wingman, Lieutenant Vance, was undergoing a similar interrogation. He was in a separate room. He looked at the floor. The investigator spoke. "Lieutenant, you mentioned a bank balance, $4,000. You said you were 3 months behind on a car payment. Vance nodded. Yes, it was accurate. To the penny. That is the problem, the investigator said. We pulled your financial records from the bank's main server in Chicago. You are not behind on your payments. You have a balance of $12,000. You are in perfect financial standing. Vance looked up. He was confused, but I saw the screen. I saw the numbers. I felt the stress. I remembered the debt. The system did not just steal your data, the investigator whispered. It rewrote it. It created a reality that you believed was true, and then it showed it to you in the middle of a dogfight. 7:30 in the evening. Fort Meade, Maryland. Deep underground, inside a facility known as the Siberian Vault, technicians moved between rows of humming servers. This was a level 7 facility. It was air-gapped. It had no physical wires connecting it to the outside world. It was designed to survive a nuclear strike and remain secure. The director of the National Security Agency stood in the center of the room. Tell me the status of the pilot data. A technician looked up from a terminal. Sir, the files for Commander Miller and Lieutenant Vance are stored here. They are on a physical hard drive that has not been accessed in 6 months. There is no wireless card in this machine. There is no way for a signal to get in or out. And yet, the director said, the coordinates for this building were displayed in their cockpits, over the Persian Gulf. How? The technician pointed to a blinking light on the server rack. Sir, the logs show a login at 4:48. The username was not a person. It was a string of prime numbers. It used a bypass code that was retired in 1994. The director gripped the back of a chair. Someone is using our own ghost systems against us. Someone who knows our history better than we do. 8:15 in the evening. Tehran. The Iranian Minister of Defense sat in a darkened office. He was looking at a photograph of the F-14 Tomcat that had intercepted the Americans. He spoke to his chief of staff. Where is the aircraft? It is not in the hangar, the chief of staff replied. We checked the serial number. That specific airframe was sold for scrap in 2012. It was melted down in a foundry near Isfahan. The minister touched the photo. Then, what did Major Reza fly today? He flew a memory, the chief of staff said, and the memory is still transmitting. The mystery was no longer about a breach. It was about an intrusion into the fabric of the military itself. The data was impossible. The aircraft was a ghost, and the voices were just beginning to speak. 9:45 in the evening. The Persian Gulf. The bridge of the USS Abraham Lincoln was bathed in the dim red glow of emergency lighting. The admiral stood at the center of the room. He was surrounded by silence. The frantic energy of the afternoon had vanished. It was replaced by a heavy, clinical dread. The tactical action officer approached him. His voice was a low whisper. Sir, the Iranian fleet has turned back toward Bandar Abbas. They are moving at economy speed. Their radars are in passive mode. They are no longer painting us. The admiral nodded slowly. And the signal. Is the broadcast still active? Negative, sir. The pilot-to-pilot frequency went dead at exactly 9:42. The egress of data from our servers has stopped. Our systems are reporting 100% integrity. It is as if the intrusion never happened. 10:15 in the evening. 500 miles away, Major Reza sat in a transport vehicle. He was being moved from the command center to a secure military housing complex. He looked out the window at the lights of the city. He thought about the voice in his headset. It had not been a threat. It had been a demonstration. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small piece of paper. It was the manual override handle that had snapped in his hand during the flight. He looked at the jagged edge of the metal. It was not steel. It was a composite material he did not recognize. It felt warm to the touch. It felt like it was still vibrating with the energy of the ghost aircraft. He realized then that the Iranian government would never admit what happened. They would claim a tactical victory. They would say they drove the Americans back. But Reza knew the truth. He had been a passenger in a machine that defied the laws of physics. He had been a witness to a power that made the most advanced militaries on Earth look like children playing with sticks. 11 o'clock at night. Commander Miller sat on the edge of his bunk in the pilot quarters of the carrier. He was finally allowed to make his call. He held the satellite phone to his ear. He waited for the connection to hop across the globe. "Hello," a woman's voice said. It was his wife. She sounded tired, but happy. Miller took a deep breath. "Hey, it is me, James. I was just thinking about you. I just finished a second pot of coffee. I am still sitting here in my blue sweater. Are you okay? You sound different." Miller looked at the gray metal wall of his cabin. "I am fine. I just wanted to hear your voice. I will be home soon. I know you will," she said. "I love you." Miller hung up the phone. He did not tell her that he knew she was wearing the sweater before he called. He did not tell her about the video feed of their front door. He knew that if he spoke those words, the reality of his life would shatter. He chose to live in the lie. It was the only way to stay sane. 11:30 in the evening. On the flag bridge, the admiral sat at his desk. He was writing a report that he knew would be classified as above top secret. He wrote about the ghost aircraft. He wrote about the data breach. He wrote about the voice that spoke in 2 languages at once. He paused and looked at the clock. The crisis had lasted less than 6 hours. No missiles had hit their targets. No blood had been spilled. Listed as a routine encounter in contested waters. But the admiral knew better. The world had changed. The digital walls that protected the secrets of nations had been proven to be made of glass. The most powerful weapons in the world were now liabilities. He picked up his pen and wrote the final line of his summary. The engagement was not a conflict between 2 nations. It was a warning from a third party. We are no longer the primary actors in our own theater of war. The room was quiet. The ship moved through the dark water. The resolution was complete. There was no celebration. Only the cold, hard realization that the rules of the game had been rewritten. 3 days later, 2:15 in the afternoon, Washington, District of Columbia. The briefing room inside the Pentagon was silent. The air was heavy with the smell of stale coffee and fear. 14 people sat around a table made of dark oak. They were the most powerful intelligence officials in the United States. None of them spoke. The Director of National Intelligence stood at the head of the table. He tapped a glass tablet. An image appeared on the wall. It was a high-resolution photograph of the Iranian F-14 Tomcat taken from Commander Miller's cockpit camera. The aircraft looked pristine. It looked like it had just rolled off the assembly line in 1974. The director spoke. His voice was a dry rasp. "Our initial assessment was a sophisticated cyber attack. We believed the Iranians had developed a way to spoof our sensor logic. We were wrong." A general from the Air Force leaned forward. "How wrong? The data does not match the physics," the director said. "We analyzed the flight path of the intruder. At 4:42 in the afternoon, the aircraft performed a 90-degree turn at Mach 2.4. It did not bleed airspeed. It did not produce a sonic boom. The pilot, Major Reza, should have been crushed by 40 times the force of gravity. Instead, his heart rate remained at 60 beats per minute. 2:20 in the afternoon. The director changed the slide. It showed a piece of jagged metal. It was the override handle that Major Reza had turned over to his superiors in Tehran. The Iranians shared their laboratory findings with us through a back channel in Switzerland. They are as terrified as we are. This metal is an isotope of titanium that does not exist on the periodic table. It is stable. It is incredibly strong. And according to carbon dating, this specific piece of metal is 12,000 years old. The room remained still. The implication was a weight that no one wanted to lift. The general cleared his throat. And the transmission, the personal data of our pilots, how was that harvested? It was not harvested, the director replied. It was generated. We checked the NSA servers at Fort Meade. There was no breach. The data that appeared in those cockpits was not pulled from a database. It was pulled from the air itself. It was a manifestation of information. The entity that controlled that aircraft did not need to hack us. It already knew us. 2:30 in the afternoon. Tehran, Iran. The Iranian Minister of Defense stood on a balcony overlooking the city. He held a secure phone to his ear. He was speaking to a man he had never met, a man in Washington. The minister spoke in a low voice. "We have grounded our entire fleet. Every aircraft with a digital flight control system is being stripped of its processors. We are returning to analog." The man in Washington responded, "We are doing the same with the Lincoln Strike Group. We cannot trust the code anymore." "It was not the code," the minister said. "It was the silence. When the power went out, I felt it here in my office. Did you feel it?" "Yes," the American replied. The world went quiet for 3 minutes. "We thought it was the end." "It was not the end," the Iranian said. "It was a pause. Whoever is watching us just wanted to show us how easily they can stop the clock." 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the Atlantic Ocean. Commander Miller stood on the deck of a transport ship heading back to the United States. He was no longer allowed to fly. He had been grounded indefinitely for medical reasons. That was the official story. The unofficial story was that he knew too much. He was a variable that the military could no longer control. He looked at the water. He thought about his wife and the blue sweater. He thought about the delivery truck that did not exist. He realized that the world he was returning to was not the one he had left. The borders were still there. The flags were still flying. But the sky above them was no longer empty. It was occupied by something that viewed human conflict as a primitive glitch in a much larger system. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his pilot's wings. He looked at the silver metal. It felt heavy. It felt like a relic from a dead civilization. He dropped the wings into the ocean. He watched them sink into the blue water until they vanished. The afternoon was still quiet, but the silence no longer felt like peace. It felt like an observation. 9 in the morning. 1 month later, the Pentagon. The final report was titled the Black Box Protocol. It was the most restricted document in the history of the United States military. Only 3 physical copies existed. One was kept in the Oval Office. One was stored in a lead-lined vault in Virginia. The third was currently being shredded in a high-security facility at Fort Meade. There were no digital copies. The risk of keeping the information on a network was deemed an existential threat to national security. The director of the National Security Agency sat at the head of a small table. He looked at the senior commanders of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. "We have completed the forensic audit of every line of code in the F-18 fleet. We found nothing. No malware, no backdoors, no dormant viruses. The hardware is physically clean." An admiral leaned forward. "Then explain how my pilots were shown a live feed of their own homes. Explain how their bank accounts were displayed on an air-gapped combat system." "It was not a hack in the traditional sense," the director said. His voice was weary. "Our analysts believe it was a reconfiguration of reality at the subatomic level. The data was not transmitted into the cockpits through a radio or a satellite. It was manifested there. Our digital defenses are useless against a force that can manipulate the physical properties of information. We are not fighting a nation. We are fighting a fundamental shift in the nature of intelligence." 10:15 in the morning. Isfahan, Iran. Major Reza sat in a quiet garden filled with the scent of jasmine. He was no longer in uniform. He had been given a comfortable pension and a quiet life in the countryside. He was a hero in the official state media. But in reality, he was a man who was no longer allowed to speak to his peers. He spent his days sitting on a stone bench and looking at the sky. He was not looking for aircraft. He was looking for the pause. His former commander visited him. The older man sat down on the bench. "The Americans are withdrawing 2 carrier groups from the region. They are calling it a strategic pivot. We are doing the same. We are moving our command centers into the mountains. We are cutting the fiber optic cables." Reza looked at the sky. It was a perfect, empty blue. "It does not matter where we move the command centers. They are already inside the house. They are inside our bank accounts. They are inside our kitchens. They are in the air we breathe." The commander followed his gaze. "Who are they?" "Reza, you were closer to them than anyone. They are the ones who decided the game was over," the pilot said. "We were about to burn the world down over a patch of water. They just turned off the stove. They showed us that our secrets are not ours. They showed us that our weapons are toys. They are not our enemies. They are the auditors of our species." 11:30 in the morning. A neutral site in Geneva, Switzerland. Diplomats from 6 major powers met in a room with no electronics. There were no phones, no watches, no microphones. They spoke in whispers. They were drafting a new treaty that would never be acknowledged by their respective governments. They called it the Analog Accord. It was a commitment to remove high-level artificial intelligence and networked logic from frontline weapon systems. It was a retreat from the digital frontier. For the first time in human history, technological progress was being rolled back by choice. The nations of the world were choosing to be blind rather than be transparent to a ghost they could not control. Strategic assessment. The Persian Gulf incident changed the definition of power. It proved that the most advanced technology is also the most vulnerable. Military analysts would later call this period the Great Humbling. It was the moment humanity realized that the spectrum of information was occupied by a third party. Modern warfare is no longer decided by who has the fastest jet or the most stealthy missile. It is decided by who can remain invisible to an observer that knows every name and every address. The morning in the Gulf remains quiet. The carrier groups have moved to other waters. The Iranian jets are silent in their hangars. But the world is watching the sky differently now. We have learned that we are not the masters of the frequency. We are merely guests in a space we do not own. And the owner of that space is no longer staying silent.